The massive doors of the Galactic Combat Institute stretched upward like the entrance to a temple. Sarah Chen stood at the bottom of the stone steps, looking up at the building that would either make her dreams come true or crush them completely. Her single duffel bag felt heavy on her shoulder, containing everything she owned in the galaxy. Around her, other new students walked past. They looked nothing like humans. Some had 4 arms, others had skin that looked like living crystal. One creature moved like a snake but stood upright. Sarah had studied all the different alien species before coming here, but seeing them in person still made her feel small and out of place. The Combat Institute was famous across 17 star systems. Only the best warriors from each species could attend. Sarah was the first human ever accepted, and she knew most people thought it was a mistake. Humans had only joined the Galactic Federation 5 years ago. Most aliens still saw them as primitive creatures good only for basic work. Sarah walked up the steps and through the doors. The inside of the building was even more impressive than the outside. The walls were covered with weapons from 1,000 different worlds. Holographic displays showed famous battles from galactic history. The ceiling seemed to stretch up forever, with floating platforms where advanced students practiced their combat techniques. "New students report to Hall 7, announced a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Sarah followed the crowd of new students down a long corridor. Her boots made soft sounds on the polished floor, while other species made clicking, scraping, or no sounds at all. Hall 7 was enormous. 47 new students sat on floating seats arranged in a circle. Sarah found an empty seat and sat down carefully. The chair adjusted itself to her human body shape, which was a relief. She had been worried about whether the alien technology would work for her. The other students talked quietly among themselves. Sarah heard dozens of different languages being translated in real time by the universal translators they all wore. She recognized some of her classmates from the species files she had studied. The 4-armed ones were Zilithians, known for their spinning combat techniques. The snake-like creatures were Vorthak, famous for their fluid fighting style. The crystal-skinned beings were Kethmor, who fought with mathematical precision. A door opened at the front of the hall, and the room fell silent. The creature that walked in was clearly Zilithian, but unlike any Sarah had seen before. He was tall even by Zilithian standards, with 4 powerful arms and skin that looked like polished metal. Scars covered his arms and chest, each one telling the story of a battle survived. His eyes were ancient, holding the wisdom of centuries. "I am Instructor Vexthul," he said, his voice carrying easily through the large hall. "For the next 3 years I will teach you the art of energy blade combat. Some of you will become warriors worthy of the galaxy's respect. Others will fail and return home in disgrace." His 4 eyes swept across the room, studying each student. When his gaze reached Sarah, she felt like he was looking straight through her. She kept her back straight and met his stare without flinching. "Before we begin, you must understand the fundamental laws of combat," Vexthul continued. He gestured with one of his hands, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the room. It showed different alien species wielding energy weapons. Each species has evolved over millions of years to fight in a specific way. Your bodies, your minds, your very souls are shaped by this evolution. The display showed a Zilithian warrior spinning 4 blades at once, moving too fast for human eyes to follow. "We Zilithians fight with multiple weapons because our 4 arms and specialized brain structure allow perfect coordination." The image changed to show a Vorthak warrior flowing like liquid around an opponent's attacks. The Vorthak fight with fluid motion because their serpentine bodies and elongated nervous systems permit such flexibility. Next came a Kethmor warrior whose movements were so precise they looked like a mathematical equation come to life. The Kethmor fight with geometric precision because their crystalline neural networks calculate the perfect angle for every strike. Instructor Vexithul's 4 arms gestured dismissively. "Some young fools think they can learn the fighting styles of other species. They believe that if they practice hard enough, they can overcome millions of years of evolution." These fools always fail. Sarah felt her heart begin to beat faster. She had come to the academy hoping to learn advanced combat techniques. Was he saying it was impossible? "The greatest folly," Vexthul continued, "is the belief that any species can master dual-blade combat. Fighting with 2 energy weapons at once requires neural pathways that simply do not exist in any known species. The mental coordination needed would cause immediate brain overload. Any creature attempting dual-blade technique would suffer cognitive collapse and certain death. The instructor's eyes found Sarah again. This is especially true for primitive species that have only recently achieved space travel. Your brains lack the advanced neural structures needed for even basic energy weapon combat, much less anything sophisticated. Several students turned to look at Sarah. She felt her cheeks grow warm but kept her expression neutral. She had faced doubt and dismissal her entire life. It was nothing new. Your neural pathways, your muscle memory, your very evolution, Vexthul said, his voice growing more forceful. All of these are designed for your species' natural combat form. Attempts to fight in ways your evolution did not prepare you for will result in failure at best, death at worst. The holographic display changed again, showing brain scans of different species. Sarah could see the complex neural structures in each alien brain, specialized areas that controlled their combat abilities. When a human brain appeared, it looked simple by comparison. Combat is not about desire or determination, the instructor said. It is about biological reality. A Vorthak cannot spin 4 blades like a Zilithian, no matter how much they want to. A Kethmore cannot flow like liquid regardless of their training, and no species can safely wield 2 energy blades simultaneously. Sarah listened to every word, but instead of discouragement, she felt something else growing inside her. It was the same feeling she had experienced as a child when adults told her she could not do something, because she was too small, too weak, or too human. It was the feeling that made her want to prove them wrong. Tomorrow we begin practical training, Vexthul announced. You will each be given a single energy blade suited to your species' natural fighting style. Those who show promise will continue. Those who do not will be sent home. The instructor's 4 eyes swept the room one final time. Remember what I have told you today. Accept your limitations. Work within the boundaries your evolution has set. This is the path to survival. As the students began to file out of the hall, Sarah remained in her seat for a moment longer. She thought about everything she had heard, every limitation that had been placed on her species, every assumption about what humans could and could not do. She thought about the phrase Instructor Vexthul had used. No species can wield 2 swords. The certainty in his voice, the absolute nature of his statement, the way he had looked at her when he spoke about primitive species and their limitations. Sarah stood up and gathered her belongings. As she walked toward the exit, she found herself smiling, not because she agreed with what she had heard, but because she knew something the instructor did not. Humans had a long history of being told what they could not do, and an even longer history of proving those people wrong. Tomorrow her real education would begin. The science laboratory was unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. Floating holographic displays showed 3-dimensional models of alien brains, each one rotating slowly while data streams flowed around them like digital waterfalls. Dr. Quilran stood at the front of the room, her 6 tentacle-like arms manipulating the displays with practiced ease. Dr. Quilran belonged to a species called the Mentari, known throughout the galaxy for their scientific minds. Her skin had a pale blue color that seemed to shift and change as she moved. When she spoke, her voice had a musical quality that made even complex scientific concepts sound almost like poetry. Today we study the biological basis of combat ability, she announced to the class of new students. Understanding why each species fights as they do is crucial to mastering your own natural techniques. Sarah sat in the middle of the classroom, surrounded by her alien classmates. Over the past few weeks, she had gotten to know some of them better. There was Crixtal, a Kethmore whose crystal skin caught the light in beautiful patterns. He spoke in precise mathematical terms and treated every conversation like a logic puzzle to be solved. Zarathul was a Zilithian like Instructor Vexthul, but much younger. Her 4 arms moved constantly as she talked, gesturing in complex patterns that Sarah was beginning to understand was their species' natural way of communication. She was friendly but clearly saw Sarah as something of a curiosity. Then there was Silith, a Vorthak whose serpentine body could coil and uncoil in ways that made Sarah dizzy to watch. Silith rarely spoke, but when he did, his words carried a wisdom that seemed much older than his apparent age. Let us examine the Zilithian brain first, Dr. Quilran said, and the holographic display focused on a 4-lobed organ that looked nothing like a human brain. Notice the specialized coordination centers in each lobe. These areas developed over millions of years to control 4 independent limbs simultaneously. The display showed electrical impulses racing through the Zilithian brain, creating complex patterns that reminded Sarah of lightning storms. Different colored streams represented the neural pathways that controlled each of the forearms. The Zilithian combat advantage comes from their ability to think with 4 separate motor control systems at once, Dr. Quillran continued. While other species must choose between attack and defense, Zilithians can do both simultaneously with different arms. Zarathul straightened with obvious pride. Sarah could see why. The holographic brain looked incredibly sophisticated, like a biological computer designed specifically for combat. The display changed to show a Vorthak brain, which looked more like a long segmented tube than the compact organ Sarah was familiar with. The Vorthak nervous system extends throughout their entire body, Dr. Quillran explained. Their elongated brain structure allows for flexibility that other species cannot match. The electrical patterns in the Vorthak brain moved in flowing waves, like water running down a hill. Sarah watched Salith from the corner of her eye and saw him nod in approval. Vorthak warriors can literally think with their entire body, the doctor continued. Every scale, every muscle fiber is connected to their combat consciousness. This allows them to flow around attacks in ways that seem impossible to species with rigid bone structures. Next came the Kethmore brain, which looked like a beautiful crystal formation rather than biological tissue. The electrical patterns inside it moved in perfect geometric shapes, creating patterns that were almost hypnotically beautiful. The Kethmore neural matrix is perhaps the most precise in the known galaxy, Dr. Quillran said. Their crystalline brain structure calculates angles, distances, and timing with mathematical perfection. They do not guess where their blade will strike. They know. Crixtal's crystal skin seemed to glow brighter as he listened. Sarah had seen him practice in the training halls, and his movements really did look like living mathematics. The display shifted through several other species, each with their own specialized brain structures and combat advantages. Sarah found herself feeling smaller and more out of place with each example. Every other species seemed to be perfectly designed for fighting, while humans appeared to be designed for nothing in particular. Finally, the holographic display showed a human brain. Compared to all the others, it looked disappointingly simple. Just 2 hemispheres connected by a bridge of tissue, with none of the specialized combat structures that made other species so formidable. The human brain, Dr. Quillran said, and Sarah felt every eye in the room turn toward her. An interesting organ, primarily notable for its adaptability in primitive environments. The doctor manipulated the display to show different areas of the human brain lighting up. Humans show remarkable neural plasticity for basic learning tasks. However, they lack the specialized structures necessary for advanced combat techniques. Sarah watched the simple electrical patterns moving through the holographic human brain. They looked chaotic compared to the organized lightning of the Zilithian mind or the flowing rivers of the Vorthak consciousness. The bilateral structure of the human brain would theoretically allow for dual weapon coordination. Dr. Quillran continued, and Sarah's attention sharpened. Each hemisphere could potentially control one weapon independently. However, the human neural processing speed is far too slow for such coordination to be practical in real combat. One of the Mentari students raised a tentacle arm to ask a question. Doctor, what would happen if a human actually tried to use 2 energy weapons at once? Dr. Quillran's skin color shifted to a deeper blue, which Sarah had learned indicated serious thought. The neural feedback would cause immediate disorientation and likely permanent brain damage. The human mind simply cannot handle the complex coordination required. So it would be fatal? The student pressed. Almost certainly, the doctor replied. The human brain would essentially short-circuit from the overload. This is why dual-blade combat remains theoretical. No known species has the neural architecture to survive it. Sarah kept her expression neutral, but inside her mind was racing. The doctor spoke about human neural processing speed as if it were a scientific fact, but Sarah wondered if they really understood how human brains worked. After all, humans had only been known to the galaxy for 5 years. After class, Sarah made her way to the Academy's vast library. The building was a marvel of alien architecture, with floating shelves that rearranged themselves based on what each visitor was looking for. Sarah approached the central information console and spoke her request. Clearly, I want to research human neuroplasticity and adaptive combat techniques from Earth history. The console hummed for a moment, then directed her to a quiet section where several holographic displays materialized around a comfortable reading chair. Sarah settled in and began to study. What she found was fascinating. The Galactic database contained detailed records of human martial arts, but they were filed under cultural curiosities rather than serious combat techniques. She read about something called Mushin, a mental state that ancient human warriors achieved, where their conscious minds stepped aside and their bodies moved with perfect instinct. She studied records of human soldiers who could fight with weapons in both hands, switching between offense and defense so quickly that their enemies could not keep up. She read about the human capacity for learning and adaptation, qualities that the galaxy seemed to see as primitive rather than advantageous. Most importantly, she found research on human neuroplasticity that contradicted everything Dr. Quilran had said. Human brains could form new neural pathways throughout their entire lives, adapting to new challenges in ways that more specialized brains could not match. As Sarah read, she began to realize something important. The galaxy's scientists were not wrong about other species' capabilities. Zilithians really did have four-lobed brains perfectly designed for multi-limb coordination. Forthak really could think with their entire bodies. Kethmore really did calculate with mathematical precision, but they were wrong about humans. They saw the human brain's lack of specialization as a weakness, when it might actually be humanity's greatest strength. Sarah spent hours in the library, reading everything she could find about human adaptability and learning capacity. When she finally returned to her dormitory room, it was late at night and the corridors were empty. As she prepared for bed, Sarah thought about Dr. Quilran's words. No known species has the neural architecture to survive dual-blade combat. The certainty in her voice had been absolute, just like Instructor Vexthol's pronouncement that no species could wield two swords. Sarah lay down on her narrow bed and stared up at the ceiling. Tomorrow would bring more practical training with single energy blades, more lessons about the limitations of her species, more reminders that she did not belong among the galaxy's elite warriors. But tonight she smiled in the darkness, because she was beginning to understand something that the galaxy's greatest scientists and instructors did not. They were measuring human capability by alien standards. They were looking for specialized neural structures that humans had never needed, because humans had developed something else instead, the ability to become whatever they needed to become. And if Sarah was right, that ability might be exactly what she needed to prove that impossible was just another word. Why 3 months into training, Sarah's progress with a single energy blade could charitably be called adequate. While her classmates displayed the natural grace their evolution had gifted them, Sarah struggled with every aspect of energy weapon combat. The blade felt wrong in her hands, where Krixtal's crystal skin seemed to resonate with the weapon's energy field, and Zarathul could spin her blade with forearmed precision that looked like art. Sarah's movements were clumsy and uncertain. The energy weapon's quantum-entangled responsiveness to neural commands worked perfectly with specialized alien brain structures, but seemed constantly confused by human thought patterns. During morning practice sessions, Instructor Vexthol would walk among the students, offering corrections and guidance. When he reached Sarah, his four eyes would narrow with something that might have been disappointment. "Your grip is too rigid, human," he would say, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of experience. "The energy blade must become part of your body, not a tool you hold." Sarah would adjust her grip, trying to feel the connection other students seemed to achieve naturally. But the blade remained stubbornly separate from her consciousness, a foreign object that refused to become the extension of her will that advanced combat required. "Your footwork lacks the precision your species' bipedal structure should provide," Vexthol continued during another session. "Even with your limited neural capacity, basic positioning should be within your capabilities." The instructor's words stung, but Sarah had learned not to let her frustration show. Around her, classmates like Silith moved with liquid grace that made combat look like dance, while others displayed the mathematical precision or multi-limbed coordination their species were known for. After one particularly difficult training session, Zarathul approached Sarah as they were putting their practice weapons away. "Do not feel bad about your progress," the young Zilithian said, her four hands moving in the gesture patterns that accompanied her speech. For a primitive species, you are doing remarkably well. Sarah forced a smile. Thank you, Zarathul. That's very encouraging. Perhaps you could request assignment to support roles, Zarathul continued helpfully. Combat coordination, supply management, tactical planning. There are many important positions that do not require actual fighting ability. I'll consider it, Sarah replied, though she had no intention of giving up on her dream of becoming a warrior. That night, after her classmates had gone to sleep, Sarah made her way through the darkened corridors of the academy. She had spent weeks learning the patrol patterns of the security systems, identifying the windows of time when certain areas would be unmonitored. The training halls were vast spaces filled with holographic practice opponents and weapons racks containing deactivated energy blades. Sarah chose 2 practice weapons from the rack, their weight familiar in her hands after months of single-blade training. She stood in the center of the empty hall, holding a deactivated blade in each hand. According to everything she had been taught, what she was about to attempt should be impossible. Her human brain lacked the specialized neural structures necessary for dual weapon coordination. The attempt should result in cognitive overload and potential brain damage. Sarah ignited both practice blades simultaneously. The first few nights were disasters. With 2 blades active, her movements became chaotic and dangerous. She nearly injured herself several times as the weapons moved independently of her intentions, following conflicting neural commands that her brain could not coordinate. But Sarah had read about human neuroplasticity in the Academy library. Unlike the fixed neural structures of other species, human brains could form new pathways throughout their lives, adapting to challenges that evolution had never prepared them for. Each night she returned to the training hall. Each night she attempted to coordinate 2 energy blades at once. Each night she failed in spectacular and sometimes painful ways, but failure was not the end of the story. It was data. Sarah began to understand that the formal combat techniques she was being taught in class were designed for alien physiology and psychology. Zilithian spinning techniques required 4 arms and specialized brain lobes. Forthak fluid motion required serpentine flexibility and distributed nervous systems. Kethmore geometric precision required crystalline neural matrices. Humans had none of these advantages. But they had something else. They had the ability to improvise. Instead of trying to copy alien techniques, Sarah began experimenting with movements that felt natural to her human body. She studied the way her 2 arms could work independently while remaining coordinated. Like a musician playing 2 different melodies simultaneously, she practiced switching between offense and defense with her 2 blades, using one to parry while attacking with the other. She experimented with using the weapons to create openings for each other, setting up combinations that no single-blade fighter could execute. Most importantly, she stopped thinking about combat as a series of predetermined techniques and started thinking about it as a conversation between herself and her opponent, where the ability to say something unexpected could win the entire exchange. Slowly, night by night, her movements began to improve. The chaos became controlled. The conflicting commands became complementary actions. Her human brain, lacking the specialized structures of other species, began building new ones through pure repetition and adaptation. During day classes, Sarah's single-blade work also began to improve. Though she was careful not to show too much progress too quickly, she let her classmates and instructors continue seeing her as the struggling human who was doing her best with limited capabilities. Sarah's technique is becoming more stable, she overheard Instructor Vexthol telling another teacher after a practice session. Still far below galactic standards, but adequate for basic military service if only he knew what she was doing in those empty training halls every night. Sarah's secret practice began incorporating elements from all the different species fighting styles. She couldn't spin 4 blades like a Zilithian, but she could use 2 blades in a spinning pattern that created similar defensive coverage. She couldn't flow like a Vorthak, but she could move unpredictably enough to disrupt an opponent's timing. She couldn't calculate with Kethmore precision, but she could improvise solutions that mathematical thinking could not anticipate. After 2 months of nightly practice, something remarkable happened. Sarah realized she was no longer thinking about controlling 2 separate weapons. Instead, she was thinking with 2 blades as if they were extensions of her consciousness, each one responding to different aspects of her tactical awareness. Her left blade had become her shield and probe, testing defenses and creating openings. Her right blade had become her sword and hammer, exploiting the opportunities her left blade created. Together they formed something that was greater than the sum of its parts. One night, as she practiced against holographic opponents in the empty training hall, Sarah caught sight of her reflection in the polished wall panels. What she saw made her pause in amazement. She was smiling, not the forced smile she wore during difficult day classes, or the polite smile she used when classmates offered their well-meaning but condescending encouragement. This was a smile of pure joy, the expression of someone doing exactly what they were meant to do. For the first time since arriving at the academy, Sarah felt like she belonged in this place. The holographic opponents she faced each night grew more challenging as she improved, but they were still programmed based on conventional single-blade combat techniques. Sarah began to realize that her dual-blade style was not just different from traditional galactic combat, it was incomprehensible to fighters who had never encountered anything like it when she used one blade to set up attacks for the other. The holographic opponents could not predict or counter her strategies, because their programming assumed all attacks would come from a single weapon. When she switched between offensive and defensive roles with her two blades, the simulations became confused about whether she was attacking or defending. Sarah was creating something entirely new. Not just a human fighting like an alien, but a human fighting like a human in ways the galaxy had never imagined possible. As her secret training continued, Sarah noticed changes in herself beyond improved combat ability. Her confidence grew, not just in fighting but in everything she did. She began to speak up more in theoretical classes, offering perspectives that her alien classmates had never considered. When Dr. Quilran discussed the neural basis of combat ability, Sarah asked questions about human adaptability that the doctor could not easily answer. When Instructor Vexthul explained why certain techniques were impossible, Sarah listened with the quiet confidence of someone who knew that impossible was often just another word for not yet achieved. Her classmates began to notice the change in her demeanor, though they attributed it to growing confidence rather than secret mastery of forbidden techniques. Sarah seems more settled lately, Crixtel observed during one of their study sessions. Perhaps she is finally accepting her limitations and finding peace within them. It is good to see her adapting, Zarating to be redefined. The announcement came during morning assembly, 3 weeks before graduation. Instructor Vexthul stood before the assembled students, his forearms gesturing in the formal patterns that indicated an important proclamation. The final examination, he declared, will determine who among you has truly mastered the warrior's path. Each student will face single combat against a senior academy student. Victory means graduation and recognition as a galactic warrior. Defeat means failure and dismissal from the program. Sarah felt her heart rate increase as she listened to the details. This was what she had been training for, the moment that would prove whether all her secret practice had been worth the risk. Combat assignments will be determined by random selection, Vexthul continued. Each of you will draw the name of your opponent from the selection matrix. One by one, students approached the holographic display and placed their hands on the scanner. Names appeared in glowing letters, pairing each new student with a senior who would test their abilities in formal combat. Sarah watched as her classmates received their assignments. Zarathul drew a fourth-year Zalithian known for defensive expertise. Salith was matched with a Vorthak senior famous for her flowing attack patterns. Crixtel would face another Kethmore whose geometric combat style was considered poetry in motion throughout the academy. When Sarah's turn came, she placed her hand on the scanner and waited. The display flickered for a moment, processing her biometric signature, then displayed her opponent's name in letters that seemed to burn into her consciousness. Senior Student Crixavel of the Kethmore Collective. Combat Specialty, Absolute Precision Blade Work. Academy Record, 47 victories, 0 defeats. Sarah stared at the name for a long moment, feeling the weight of what lay ahead. She had heard of Crixvel from other students. The senior Kethmore was legendary, even among the Academy's elite, a fighter whose mathematical precision had never been successfully countered by any opponent. Interesting, came a crystalline voice from behind her. Sarah turned to see Crixtel, her classmate, studying the display with his geometric gaze. Crixvel is considered the finest blade artist in the Academy's current student body. Her technique is so precise that instructors use her combat recordings as teaching examples. Lucky me, Sarah replied with a smile that she hoped looked more confident than she felt. I do not think you understand, Crixtel continued, his crystal skin shifting to patterns that indicated concern. Crixvel has never been defeated. Not once in 4 years of study. Many consider her the most formidable student the Academy has produced in decades. Sarah nodded, acknowledging the information. I understand she's skilled. Skilled? Crixtel's geometric features showed surprise. Sarah Crixvel moves with mathematical perfection. Every strike, every parry, every step is calculated to optimize effectiveness. Fighting her with basic single-blade technique would be like trying to solve an advanced equation with simple arithmetic. That evening, Sarah made her way to the Academy's combat recording library. If she was going to face Crixvel in 3 weeks, she needed to understand exactly what she was up against. The library's holographic displays showed thousands of recorded combat sessions from throughout the Academy's history. Sarah accessed Crixvel's files and began studying her fighting style in detail. What she saw was both beautiful and terrifying. Crixvel moved like living mathematics, every action flowing from precise calculations that seemed to predict her opponent's responses before they had even decided what to do. Her blade work created geometric patterns in the air, each strike following perfect angles that maximized force and minimized energy expenditure. Sarah watched recording after recording, studying Crixvel's technique from every angle. The senior student's combat style was flawless according to traditional Kethmore theory. She never wasted motion, never took unnecessary risks, never made tactical errors. More importantly, she had faced opponents from every major galactic species and defeated them all, using the same mathematical approach. Zilithians with their four-armed advantages, Vorthak with their fluid unpredictability, even other Kethmore with their own geometric precision, all had fallen to Crixvel's superior calculations. Sarah spent hours analyzing the recordings, looking for weaknesses or patterns she could exploit. But Crixvel's technique seemed to have no flaws. Every possible attack had been calculated and countered. Every strategy had been anticipated and defeated. As she prepared to leave the library, Sarah realized something important. Every opponent Crixvel had faced used conventional single-blade techniques. They all fought according to their species' traditional styles, following patterns that had been refined over millennia, but remained fundamentally predictable. None of them had fought the way Sarah could fight. That night, Sarah's secret training took on new urgency. In the empty practice halls, she worked through dual-blade combinations that no galactic combat manual had ever described. She practiced techniques that would be impossible for any other species to execute, movements that could only exist because of human neural adaptability. But even as her confidence in her secret abilities grew, Sarah knew that revealing them would require perfect timing. If she showed her dual-blade mastery too early, Crixvel would have time to analyze and counter her techniques. If she waited too long, she might not have the chance to demonstrate what she could do before being defeated by conventional means. The solution came to her on a quiet evening 2 days before the examination. She was reviewing her options when she realized that the choice was not when to reveal her abilities, but how to frame their revelation. Sarah made her way through the academy corridors to Instructor Vexthel's office. The door was ornate, carved with symbols representing the greatest warriors in galactic history. She pressed the announcement panel and waited. "Enter," came the instructor's voice from within. Vexthel's office was a testament to 3 centuries of combat experience. Weapons from dozens of worlds lined the walls, each one a trophy from a significant battle. Holographic displays showed tactical analyses from famous conflicts throughout galactic history. The instructor himself sat behind a desk made from crystallized starship armor, his forearms working on different documents simultaneously. When Sarah entered, his ancient eyes looked up with mild curiosity. "Student Sarah," he said, his voice carrying the measured tones of someone accustomed to respect. "You wish to speak with me?" Sarah approached the desk and stood at attention. 2 deactivated training blades held at her sides. "Yes, instructor. I wanted to discuss your statement from our first day of classes." Vexthel's 4 eyes narrowed slightly. "Which statement would that be?" "You said that no species can wield 2 swords," Sarah replied, her voice steady and calm. "I'd like to respectfully challenge that assertion." The office fell silent. For a long moment, Vexithul stared at the young human standing before him, holding two training blades with quiet confidence. His expression shifted through several emotions: surprise, confusion, and finally something that might have been concern. "Student Sarah," he said carefully, "are you suggesting that you have attempted dual-blade combat techniques?" "I'm suggesting that your statement was based on incomplete information about human capabilities," Sarah replied. "You said that no species can master dual-blade technique because the neural coordination would cause cognitive overload. But you were measuring all species by the same standards." Sarah activated both training blades simultaneously. The energy weapons hummed to life, their plasma fields casting dancing shadows across the office walls. "Humans don't have the specialized neural structures of other species," she continued, beginning to move through a flowing sequence that incorporated elements from multiple galactic combat styles. "We don't have four-lobed brains like Zilithians, or distributed nervous systems like Vorthak, or crystalline matrices like Kethmore." Her blades moved in perfect coordination, one creating openings while the other exploited them, both working together in patterns that defied conventional combat theory. Vexthul watched in stunned silence as Sarah demonstrated techniques that his centuries of experience insisted should be impossible. "What we have instead," Sarah said as she continued the demonstration, "is the ability to create new neural pathways throughout our lives. We adapt to challenges our evolution never prepared us for. We become what we need to become." The demonstration lasted only 30 seconds, but it contained movements from every major galactic combat tradition, unified by something uniquely human: the ability to improvise and synthesize diverse techniques into something entirely new. Sarah deactivated the blades and stood calmly before Vexthul's desk. The instructor's forearms had stopped their work entirely, his ancient eyes wide with shock. "This is impossible," he finally whispered. "Your brain scans showed no evidence of the neural structures necessary for such coordination." "The scans showed my brain's current state when I arrived," Sarah corrected gently. "They couldn't predict what my brain would become through training and adaptation. Humans don't just adapt to environments, Instructor. We adapt ourselves." Vexthul rose slowly from his chair, his movements careful and deliberate. "Do you understand what you have just demonstrated? You have shattered combat theory that has stood for millennia. You have accomplished something that the combat arena had never held so many spectators." Word of the human students' challenge against the legendary Krixvel had spread through the academy like wildfire, drawing not only students and instructors, but also visiting dignitaries from across the galaxy who had come to witness what many expected to be either a spectacular failure or the rewriting of combat doctrine. Sarah stood in the preparation chamber adjacent to the arena, listening to the murmur of hundreds of voices beyond the walls. She had never performed before such a large audience, but strangely she felt calm. Months of secret training had prepared her for this moment in ways that went beyond combat technique. Two energy blades lay on the equipment table before her, not training weapons this time, but fully powered combat blades that could cut through starship armor. According to Academy rules, she was only authorized to carry one weapon into the arena. The second blade would remain here, unused and irrelevant to the coming fight, unless circumstances demanded otherwise. Sarah picked up the first blade, feeling its familiar weight in her right hand. The weapon's quantum-entangled responsiveness to neural commands hummed to life, recognizing her biometric signature and bonding with her consciousness. After months of practice, the connection felt as natural as moving her own arm. She looked at the second blade for a long moment, then made her decision. Sarah attached it to her belt alongside the first, hidden beneath the flowing academy cloak that all students wore during formal examinations. A soft chime indicated that the match would begin in 1 minute. Sarah took a deep breath, centered herself in the mental state she had learned to achieve during her nightly training, and walked toward the arena entrance. The combat arena was a vast circular space surrounded by ascending rows of seats that currently held more beings than Sarah had ever seen in one place. The floor was made of adaptive smart matter that could reshape itself to create different terrain configurations, though for blade combat it remained flat and featureless. As Sarah emerged from the entrance tunnel, the crowd's conversation died to a whisper. She could see beings from dozens of different species in the audience: Zilithians with their four-armed gestures, Vorthak coiled in complex viewing positions, Kethmore, whose crystal skin caught and reflected the arena's lights in prismatic displays. Instructor Vexthul stood at the arena's center, his ancient presence commanding respect from the assembled crowd. Near the instructor's platform, Sarah could see her classmates. Zarathul's 4 hands moved in encouraging gestures, while Krixtal's geometric features showed what might have been concern. Then the opposite entrance opened, and Krixavel entered the arena. Sarah had watched dozens of recordings of the legendary Kethmore, but seeing her in person was entirely different. Krixavel moved with mathematical precision even in simple walking, each step calculated for perfect efficiency. Her crystal skin formed geometric patterns that seemed to shift and flow as she moved, creating an almost hypnotic effect. The senior student carried a single energy blade of exquisite craftsmanship, its design incorporating crystalline elements that resonated with her Kethmore physiology. When she activated the weapon, it hummed with harmonic frequencies that made the very air around it seem to vibrate in mathematical patterns. Instructor Vexthul raised his forearms for attention, and the arena fell completely silent. Students and honored guests, his voice carried clearly through the space. Today we witness the final examination of student Sarah Chen, the first human to study at the Galactic Combat Institute. The crowd's attention focused on Sarah with an intensity that felt almost physical. She could sense their expectations. Most expected to see her defeated quickly by superior alien combat ability, while a few might hope for a respectable showing that proved humans could at least survive among the galaxies. Warriors, none of them expected to see what Sarah was prepared to demonstrate if necessary. Her opponent is senior student Krixvel, whose combat record stands unmatched in Academy history. Vexthul continued. This combat will be conducted according to traditional rules. Victory is achieved by disabling your opponent's weapon or forcing surrender through superior technique. Krixvel took her position at one side of the arena, her blade held in a perfect guard position that offered no openings for attack. Her crystalline features showed no emotion, only the calm calculation of a fighter who had never known defeat. Sarah walked to her position on the opposite side, drawing her single energy blade and igniting it with a sound that seemed small compared to Krixvel's harmonic weapon. The crowd probably saw a young human trying her best with limited capabilities against an opponent far beyond her abilities. If only they knew what she had spent months learning to do. Combatants ready, Instructor Vexthul announced. His 4 eyes met Sarah's for just a moment, and she saw in them a complex mixture of anticipation and concern. He alone knew what she might be capable of. Begin. Krixvel moved with the fluid precision of living mathematics, her opening attack following geometric principles that had been perfected over millennia. The strike came at an angle calculated to force Sarah into a predictable defensive response, beginning a sequence that would inevitably lead to the human's defeat through superior positioning and technique. But Sarah did not respond predictably. Instead of following the defensive pattern that Kethmore combat theory expected, Sarah improvised a counter that existed nowhere in galactic combat manuals. She used her single blade not just to parry Krixvel's attack, but to redirect it in a way that created an opening for a counterstrike that should not have been possible with conventional technique. The crowd murmured in surprise. Krixvel's crystal skin shifted to patterns that indicated recalculation, adjusting her strategy to account for Sarah's unexpected response. What followed was unlike any combat the Academy had ever witnessed. Krixvel fought with mathematical perfection, every move flowing from precise calculations that had defeated every opponent she had ever faced. Her blade work created geometric patterns in the air, each strike optimized for maximum effectiveness. But Sarah fought with something the galaxy had never seen weaponized: pure human adaptability. Her movements drew from Zilithian spinning techniques, Forthec fluid strikes, and Kethmore geometric precision, all unified by the uniquely human ability to improvise solutions to problems that had never been encountered before. For several minutes, the battle remained even. Krixvel's superior technique and experience matched against Sarah's unpredictability and adaptive thinking. The crowd watched in amazement as the human student held her own against the Academy's most legendary fighter. Then Krixvel began to execute her ultimate technique. The geometrical terminus was a combat sequence so complex and mathematically perfect that it had never been successfully countered. Sarah had seen it in the combat recordings, a flowing series of strikes that created a geometric pattern so complete that any opponent would be trapped within it, with no possible escape or defensive response. As Crixvel began the sequence, her crystal skin blazed with patterns that reflected the mathematical beauty of her movements. The crowd fell silent, recognizing that they were witnessing the legendary technique that had made her undefeatable. Sarah watched the pattern unfold, recognizing the geometric precision, even as she realized that conventional single-blade technique offered no counter to what Crixvel was creating. The geometrical terminus was not just an attack, it was a mathematical proof that there was only one possible outcome to this combat, unless someone changed the fundamental assumptions of the equation. Sarah smiled. With her left hand, she drew the second energy blade from her belt and ignited it in one fluid motion. The weapon blazed to life just as Crixvel reached the critical point of her ultimate technique, creating a moment of perfect balance between mathematical certainty and impossible possibility. The arena erupted in gasps and shouts of amazement. No one had expected this. Even those who knew Sarah carried a second blade had assumed it was merely a backup weapon, not something she intended to use in actual combat. But Sarah was no longer fighting with single-blade technique. She was fighting as a human, with both blades moving in perfect coordination, creating attack patterns that existed nowhere in galactic combat theory, because no species should have been able to execute them. Her left blade intercepted Crixvel's perfect attack while her right blade simultaneously exploited, an opening that the geometrical terminus had never needed to account for, because no opponent had ever been able to attack and defend simultaneously. For the first time in 4 years of combat, Crixvel found herself facing something her mathematical training had not prepared her for. Sarah's dual-blade technique created possibilities that geometric calculation could not predict, opportunities that arose from pure improvisation rather than predetermined patterns. The final exchange lasted only seconds. Crixvel attempted to adapt her perfect technique to account for Sarah's impossible fighting style, but adaptation was not what Keithmore combat doctrine taught. Their strength lay in precision and calculation, not in responding to the fundamentally unpredictable. Sarah's blades moved in a pattern that was part Zilithian spin, part Vorthak flow, part Kethmore precision, an entirely human Innov expert in the galaxy Belai.